It's a great honor being here tonight. We were talking to Julia before the performance here, and I've been up in Millinocket for the better part of the year with my wife and I, helping to get the Wabanaki Center going. And so I took a long break from reading and being out. So Lisa and I, we did the work. I was a clinical supervisor for substance use and social work. But we took a long break to be in the mountains and mountain spirits. And my upcoming book will be based on the Katahdin Series, roughly titled the Katahdin Series. But it's just really good to be here tonight because before the pandemic hit, one of the places I was supposed to read was here at the Camden Library, and it just never happened. So it's really nice to be here. Wasn't that like 39 years ago I was born here? Where's Jack Benny when you need him, right? Okay, so I'd like to say thank you to Julia Sagasser. Yes. And Mark Burrows, too, for inviting me here tonight. I really, really appreciate being here, for sure. And also to be as one of the kickoff events for the Camden Poetry Festival. Tonight I'd like to take you on a journey. I'm just feeling like a journey tonight. I was thinking about that on the way over, that I think we're going to kind of go on a journey with Bear, Coyote, Raven, starting in the east, heading west, and back east. I've got an interesting background. I was born here in Camden, and then our family moved out west, spent my childhood out there. Back here to Maine for high school, back out west, so kind of back and forth and whatnot. So a lot of my poetry reflects that for sure. And again, I'd like to say that there might be some places that you might have to take part, however you want to do that. Couple of other words. I always like to say thank you to my mom, my adopted mom, Joanne Dana, who passed away 2 years now. And actually, my next published work is going to be a book about her life with my sister Brenda. So looking forward to that with Resolute Bear Press. And I always like to honor my mom. She was a deep and powerful spiritual leader of the Passamaquoddy people, for sure. All right, so let's get rolling here. The first book I'd like to read is going to be out of another one of my books coming up, which is Blues of the Lost Places. And this one is called Raven and Owl. It was 10 minutes before dawn. Raven nervously shifted from one foot to another on a high pine bough. Owl flew in wearily and landed next to Raven. "My sister, you're getting here later and later. You know I can't bring dawn till you stitch all dreams on the web of being." Raven was irritated. "My friend, there are too many pandemic dreams, fueled by uncertainty, fear, and worry. The dreams are many, strange, and hard for me to work in, like uncarded wool into fine silk brocade. I am exhausted." Owl closed her eyes. Raven let her sleep and painted orange and crimson on fat clouds that looked like massive koi fish. His mind roiled with the clouds. And so that's just a brief step into Blues of the Lost Places, and now I just definitely feeling like a journey here today. I hope you don't mind. So I'd like to start in a little slow here with Coyote and see what that little rascal's up to. I think we all have a little coyote in our nature, don't you? And if not, we should, by golly. Coyote walks along the trail of the Milky Way. Dust seeks dust. Wild seeks wild. He hears the moon calling. She is light years away, leaving dust in his eyes. Seeds of dreams as light waxes and wild wanes. I'm a big lover of jazz. I used to be a working musician. I used to play jazz. I used to have the upright I was the guy that played the upright bass that, he was all hauling around everywhere. And finally, I had to trade that in because playing down south in the southern states, it's just too much maintenance for upright basses, so I switched over to a fretless bass. Big fan of Charles Mingus and, all the great composers in jazz. It's my hope that one day they'll take the same seat that the great classical composers do. This one is called Avian Bebop. Coyote tapped his foot to the steady walking bass line of Charles Mingus. Yes, I like this. It's like bedrock talking as it moves. Coyote invited Raven and his kin and anyone else who would come. After the concert, the sax player said to the trumpet player, "Damn, what happened with our horns today? They sang." They noticed the crows and ravens lining the telephone wires. Sometimes we like to have those conversations late in the night, don't we? And this one's called Pebbles. We met in an arroyo out past the neon lights. Bear, coyote, raven. We ambled and ate and gave crumbs to ants. We took experience like tiny pebbles in a rattle. One pebble, not very musical. Put many in a gourd and you have a conversation through the night. Now we're going to go into a little bit of the journey out west, starting in the east. This one's called Cedar, Sage, Sweetgrass, Tobacco. Coyote and Raven laughed as my claws got cut up in the fine strands of sweetgrass I tried to braid. I swore, forgetting my human voice. I couldn't help myself. The smell of the earth and sweetgrass brought out the claws. Cedar, sage, sweetgrass, tobacco. They found me in the blueberry fields outside of Calais, Maine. Blue smacking lips created a strange contrapuntal line to Raven's flight. Coyote stole from the edge of the field, glancing cautiously. Cedar, sage, sweetgrass, tobacco. Time for a trip. Smacked my lips. Coyote looked west, stood on two legs and tucked his hair underneath his hat. Cedar, sage, sweetgrass, tobacco. What are the medicine? I asked. Said Raven, we'll be back. Spent about 2.5 years back in the height of my addiction, active phase of my substance use disorders, hitchhiking all over the country. And it was amazing to me, all the teachers that I learned from, elders, street sweepers, homeless. It's just amazing to me that when we're really open to learning, how much we learn for sure. This one's called Buffalo Blues. We climbed down from the back of an 18-wheeler on the edge of the Great Plains. A freak Alberta clipper had dumped 6 inches of snow. The warm sun made the plains look like an Appaloosa. Snow and June grass. I played harmonica, each note lost in the vastness of grass and snow and sky. Raven flew, coyote foraged. I played blues about this horse nation, the buffalo calf woman, and the times I could talk to people and they understood, and how it felt to be so alone now, each note evaporating as I played like the Appaloosa fields. A horse trailer stopped next to me. They let out a colt. He took in the air and danced. Coyote paused to listen. Raven circled above. I played on and on. And the tribes are still playing on. Finding a powwow. True life story on this one. Geez, that felt good. We need a rhythm section here. I'm ready to go. Finding a powwow. Coyote, Raven, and I decided to go to a powwow near Cheyenne. We broke out our native three-piece suits, mocks, ribbon shirts, and jeans. Our voices inhibited by dust, we stopped for one beer. Next thing I knew, there were 3 Indians in lockup. We missed the whole damn thing. I mean, who's going to bail 3 Indians, even when they were wearing three-piece suits? As you can see, I'm kind of taking you further west here. And I just feel like a journey tonight, by golly. Walking Torino. Coyote, Raven, and I bent into the wind and walked toward the city. It's a curious thing about vagabonds and their coats. They hold insects, mesquite, tiny fingers of tumbleweeds. We found the city street, desert abruptly meeting asphalt. It was not long before we were drunk to the sound of buzzing, snapping electric wires. We sang with coarse sanded throats, melody resounding and ending abruptly where the tar met the sand. Oh boy, here we are with Coyote again, rascal. The continuous buffet. An interesting notion hit Coyote. Suppose I just wait by a dumpster. That way I won't have to do this endless searching. It'll be a continuous buffet. Raven looked at Coyote slyly. Sure, why not give it a shot? That day, Coyote ate like a king. Fatigued by gluttony, he lay behind the dumpster. This way I shall never be caught, he thought. In the early morning, a loud monster came and swallowed Coyote's kingly feast in one gulp. On top of this insult, it set the dumpster on his tail. Raven laughed all morning long. 2. It took Raven 3 days to find me. My paws were elbow deep in a hollow trunk, my lips smacking honey. Oh, all right, I said, retracting golden-hued claws. We hitched back to L.A. in 2 rides. The last one was with a guy named Lucky, who hawked stuff at gas stations for fuel. We drank sangria, smoked fat, cheap cigars, and told urban legends. Lucky dropped us off in Watts at 3 a.m. I played harmonica. Raven worked the crowd. We needed money for Coyote's broken tail. 3. Well, there's that dumb shit slumped behind the dumpster, sobbing. Bear picked up that green rusty box with one paw. Coyote took off fast, howling down the alleyway. It didn't take long to hit desert. Less time still to hide and whimper where no one could hear, except in maybe lizards and such that have their own kind of laughter. 4. I awoke with a start. A cold desert night filled with stars and black sketches of jagged mountains. Coyote howled in a distant canyon. Raven was buried in an old, ratty sleeping bag, his hair the night against iridescent skin. Something was stuck in my eye. I fell back to sleep and dreamed of digging osha root. Dust kicked up and collected other dust, becoming stars and constellations. Ever wonder what happens to like pack animals? You know, I always feel really bad for them. It's like, geez, here they are hauling us around all over the place. They don't complain much, really, you know. And so I saw a bunch of that when I was a kid in Arizona, and going to the Grand Canyon, they'd have these long mule rides, or going down to the bottom of the canyon. I always felt really bad. Even as a kid, I would feel really bad for those mules. Mules on the Grand Canyon rim. Well, I guess the thing that bothers me is the asymmetry. Fat white blobs atop our fine symmetrical muscle, hailing from places unimaginative. Short names, harsh as commands. Iowa. Wow. White blobby offspring riding our fine backs, looking like the wet circle on cones that drip on us at the start of the journey. Can't we just throw them and run? Asked the novitiate. The master smiled. I had a dream once about open spaces, running arroyos, the wind on my mane, eating only what occurred to me. Others gathered. He talked like this through the night. If a child kicks one stone into another, surely he'll find a poet. The universe seems to align itself so. Walking steep canyon trails, even a mule finds poetry. Poor things, I always feel bad for them. The next one's called Rattles and Drums. Rattles and drums in 5 parts. Each pebble for the rattles collected in reverence from an anthill. The hide stretched and the wood seasoned to make a drum. Bear offered tobacco. He invited the drum to sound and held it next to his heart. Raven and Coyote shook their rattles and danced, at times moving as human, at others swirling and twisting in impossible shapes and fur and feather. Bear started to see great beasts, brothers and sisters from long ago, woolly mammoths, dinosaurs, tiny horses, and ancient men, hunting and making their offerings before the hunt. He saw buffalo driven over cliffs, and then the chase of sacred dogs as men rode their backs and shot arrows. He saw the ocean that filled this desert, and strange brothers and sisters that swam the depths in countless lives. He saw white sails and white men that brought disease and warfare and domination. He saw men with 6 guns on Harleys and priests' children. He saw peacemakers, sweat lodges, sacred pipes, ceremony, and spirit plates that filled him and his brothers and sisters with sustenance. He saw every raindrop, river, stream, and ocean, and each drop disappearing and coming to be again in their bodies. He saw dust from far galaxies collect and formulate stars and planets, the many lives he had known across the trail of the ancestors. He saw his relationship to each star, each blade of grass, each prayer, each word spoken in love, in hatred, in sadness, in ecstasy. 3. Dancing dogs, wolf, coyote, ran free from garbage dumps and loud city noises. Collected in packs, mixed in full blood, played shadow with the sun. 4. Raven calls. Canyons fill and echo with possibility. Rangers can't keep us from their cachets. They try everything. We're not fooled as humans gather more. 5. Bear felt the medicine flow wide, then collapse, and taut circles around his heart. Bear slowed the rhythm. Coyote and Raven glistened with sweat, their lungs burning, the far edges of their dance trimmed to taut rings. They left the canyon's southern rim, Raven to talk with a murder of crows that had gossip from the Dakotas, Coyote to sing in the moonlight across the border. Bear to talk with a white buffalo in Wyoming. How we doing? Okay? All right. This one is called Riding Hard into Santa Fe. We're not quite to the audience participation. We'll get there, though. Or if you want to just holler and yell right now, that's all right with me. Rotten tomatoes are okay. Well, maybe not in the library.
Say a word about the title, about the three figures, Raven, Bear, Coyote.
Pardon me?
Can you say a word about the title and the figures, the Raven, Bear?
Yeah, they're archetypes, right?
Right.
And each tribe has got different meanings for different animals. And I like to say that because in some parts, a raven, for instance, will have a different meaning in the Northwest than in the Southwest and the Northeast. So, there's over 500 tribes in the United States alone. So each one of these has different stories. Bear is oftentimes somebody that brings the medicine. Coyote is pretty much universal, the trickster.
Mischief maker.
Yeah, mischief maker, but also has his incredible insight moments too, to help bring to folks as well. So these three archetypes got started for me on my poetry journey. I think probably when I was at the throes of my addiction, hitchhiking all over around and running into elders, running into people, and just gathering information and just being lost sometimes in those out in the canyons and hitchhiking all over the place. Sometimes being alone on Route 10 in the south for days, not getting a ride. So, I'm not sure if that answered that, Mark.
It's a deep start.
Yeah. But it's a good question to ask too, because it's like the archetypes that we know in the Western world, but just a different emphasis for sure.
Yeah.
Different nuances.
Thank you.
Sure thing. Riding hard to Santa Fe. I don't even know how many parts we got here. 5, I guess. Tuck my hair under my hat. Tiny particles of sand, sage, and tumbleweed blasted my face. Storm coming. Pulled on my overcoat, head bent. Stepping from vision had always been hard for me. Ahead, the glow of city lights. 2. Felt tar underneath my feet, the give of sand, soil abruptly ending, greasy hardness penetrating bone. They said there wasn't much to eat in the mountains that winter. Town officials gave the go-ahead to shoot bears feeding in dumpsters. Out back of Santa Fe, rich folks were trying to lop off mountaintops for views and such. I shook my head. Hair fell. Coat unraveled. I heard the click-clack of my extending claws on the hard road. 3. Let them shoot me. Saw a family in a dumpster once. Best act of fatherhood I ever saw. Kind, gentle eyes feeding his family. Nothing for himself. When discovered, he was chased and beaten as his family ran to safety. Saint Survival, I called him. Hell, they even chased their own kind from dumpsters. Might as well tempt fate. I jumped into the rusted steel container. Let them shoot. I smacked loudly on day-old honey-glazed donuts. 4. An old man approached. My thoughts then of earth and roots and healing. The old man laughed. I laughed. I climbed out of the dumpster and we walked the road to the desert. That night we smoked and sweated and told stories, his tribe, my tribe. And we remembered a time when we walked together for a short while. 5. Tucked my hair under my hat. could taste tobacco and fry bread. Fur and claws retracted, I walked by his kitchen window. We stopped to look at one another. My ponderous steps slowly transitioned. Stomping, I laughed. There was a hell of a thunderstorm that day outside of Santa Fe. Yeah, there's a belief, particularly with the Salgai or the Cherokee, that the Great Bear, when he stomps out ignorance. So when you hear lightning, I think he's got to do a lot more work. We got to tire that bear out, you know? Yeah, I think so too. Counting Coup in the Pecos Wilderness. Coyote pawed the ground and looked to the south. Raven flew in ever-widening circles toward the north. Intoned Bear. They could not understand the silence Bear needed. They left him on a mountaintop in the Pecos Wilderness in a thick grove of ponderosa pine. Coyote made it to Mexico. He was almost shot 3 times near Las Cruces before slipping across the border. He sang of lost love on a porch with a Terra Humera family. Raven swam the sky and made his way to the Haisla to create mischief. Bear set his old jeans and torn t-shirt neatly folded on a flat rock like an offering. He set his gaze on the desert floor far below. He sat through the late afternoon as hair nudged him and laughed, looking back at his brothers and sisters. Bear smiled at this counting of coup. Through the night, he looked into the space between stars. At 6:45 a.m., the U.S. Air Force flew in formation back and forth for 2 hours. In the afternoon, a hiker found paw prints in the soft red earth. All right, so everybody's a critic, right? So please, jump, yell, scream, hit the sides of your chair, whatever. Make as much racket as you want. Sometimes it's funny when I've read this one before, before the pandemic, I would pass out all sorts of instruments and stuff like that, and people just like, then we just vamp on that and read the rest of the night and with percussive instruments. But that's up to you. If you want to, go ahead, make some noise. Everyone's a critic. They found an old guitar in a dump outside of Santa Fe. I knew this one, said Bear. He picked up the guitar and immediately broke all the strings with his claws. Shit. Coyote pounded on old discarded tins of peaches and pears. Raven laughed at Bear and sang an old song he had learned in Crowese. Damn it, Ethel, muttered Ernest, trying to sleep in a house by the dump. What the hell is that infernal racket? Gotta have a little fun, you know? All right, a couple more out of this, and then I'll transition into, oh, we're doing pretty good, huh? Wow, awesome. Gateway. So now they're making their way back east. They were tired after getting a ride through the night from a long-haul trucker. St. Louis, gateway to the west, except they were heading east. Raven complained about tucking his hair. Coyote nudged him. Just do it already. Bear heard a woman's voice. She was a street preacher, dressed in ragged clothes, and her long hair had ribbons of every color tied in. Her face was deeply lined like the Black Hills. The world has a chance, but your choices need to reflect the future and not selfish greed. Long has this sacred skin carried you, nurtured you, sustained you, kept you aloft in the cosmos as you plummet through space. Come on, Bear. Let's go. She's just a street preacher. We heard tons of them, said Coyote impatiently. Look, said Raven. B.B. King tonight. pointing at a poster on the telephone pole. Raven and Coyote grabbed Bear by his blue coat, and before he knew it, they were in the concert hall. Bear watched as Raven and Coyote worked the crowd. He thought of a burning world. That preacher he knew was Mother, manifested on a dusty street of the gateways to the west. And just two more here. And so now they're going to go back out to Quebec. And by all means, if you have any questions or anything you want to. Thin bears. Coyote saw an old man run across the street in Quebec City. He appeared young, but on the other side he stooped again. Found another, Coyote said to Bear at an intersection. Bear, Raven, and Coyote followed the man to the back of a packing plant. In the refrigerator room, they found two women and the man Coyote had seen on the street. They were very thin. "What the hell are you folks doing down here?" Coyote asked, taking off his hat and letting the fur flow. They changed to three thin white bears. "We come down 35 years ago and warned the tribes we were dying. We could see the melt. Now there's nowhere to hunt. Countless of us starved and died, leaving bones for scrimshaw and medicine. It is good to leave medicine, but only in its place and time. We are moving down." Bear remembered his sister that died in 2002. They found her emaciated remains on the edge of a blueberry field near Calais, Maine. Coyote and Raven sat with him and prayed around the sacred fire for 4 days. Bear felt death reaching in his new language. Drought, hurricanes, fire, autoimmune illness, COVID. It seemed he added a new word daily. Our brothers and sisters warned the others, but the others did not listen. Bear was angry as he thought of his sister and the whales he had seen washed on shore this past summer, their stomachs filled with plastic. The thin bears ate slowly so as not to get sick from the hormone-fed sides of beef. They stayed for a month until strong enough to travel. "There will be many more of us," said the old man. Raven searched for a new habitat. Bear helped them walk. Coyote encouraged them on. Each time was getting harder than the time before. And the last one I'd like to read from Bear and Coyote tonight is called Dark Clipper. He moved in awkward eloquence, like a dark clipper across the swamp. Bear listened to the moose elder speak. He talked with a tongue as old as the forest. "We have diseased livers, and we are weakened by ticks. I am afraid this might be our last age. We have no immunity for human greed, depredation, and wanton destruction." Bear pondered this and felt the deep pain of lime in his joints. "Let us move further north," he opined. The moose slowly consented, his long beard swaying in a slight warm breeze. So a lot of my poetry has to do with environmental stuff, definitely. And we were talking before we came in here about activism and some of the activism that Lisa and I have done over the years. And it's just so encouraging to see so many people with so many voices coming out and a strong way and in a unified way. It's really nice to see. We were both remembering sometimes feeling kind of alone and as old hippies being out there marching and only a small subsect, so it's really good to see, but we have to move quickly for sure.
Bear seems like a rather reflective character.
Bear, yeah, absolutely. And in some of the tribes too, like the Bear clan is the one that holds the medicine. So very reflective by nature, and one that teaches a lot of medicines, a lot of lessons. Sure thing. Take care. Take care. Yeah, very, very reflective, and I always resonate very strongly with Bear. Bear's a big part of my story for sure.
Seems like he feels a lot.
Yeah, yeah,
Deeply.
absolutely. And it's hard not to, if you think about that, right? Holding the medicines and then watching the medicines diminish over time, and watching this horrible environmental degradation that's going on. And part of that story is that the one about thin bears, and I think I shared with you before that, the Inuit had come down and warned about environmental degradation to tribes years ago, like probably 40 years ago now, and look where we're at now. So we got to do our part and keep informing and keep moving forward for sure, and educating. Going to take a little bit of a turn here. I don't even know. And moving into Blues of the Lost Places, and that one is probably going to be released after the book about my adopted mom, Jailyn Dana. And I think that one's roughly titled The Teachings of Jailyn Dana, Lessons on Forgiveness and Love. Remarkable woman. It's hard to do justice, but my sister and I are trying the best we can. Brenda, Dana, Lozado, and I are trying really hard to do justice to an incredibly remarkable woman. Okay, so here we are. I'm going to read a couple from Blues of the Lost Places, and then just end tonight with that rough Katahdin series that I'm shaping into a book, or trying to anyways.
Can you give us a little interlude of music?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right. So this is a Thai flute. And a lot of half notes with the Thai flute. You're always doing these things where you're trying to, have a note going. So like, half note, and it's really interesting, the music in many parts, and, when you think like in India, and Thailand, and Vietnam and stuff, their system is totally different, and so it's not based on the 12-note scale, and I love that. I think it's just so interesting and complex, and the polyrhythmic structure is intense. So I played in a kirtan group for a while, and I was digging it, because the guy that was running it was not opposed to funk. So I'd be like funking out of my bass, like, around all these incredibly rich polyrhythms. And I was like, oh man, this is heaven. I love it. So, hey, thank you for that, because that's going to lead me right into Reed in the Wind. The woodcarver and his apprentice stopped to listen to the reed in the wind. Broken by a gust, insects had made holes in the stem from their meal. The woodcarver and the apprentice had fasted and now were looking for a tree to cut. They walked with heads bowed as they knew a life would be taken. "Look, the perfect woodcarver," the elder pointed at the reed. The apprentice was puzzled as he listened to the wind move through the reed, soft tones blending with the wind in the trees. We prepare, we fast, we try to still our minds and ask forgiveness for taking a life so that the figure appears from the wood. Look to this reed flute shaped by nature. Without any of our interventions, the hand that moves all things has shaped this perfect flute. The world is perfect. There's nothing we can do to improve it. Our craft is but a meager attempt to fashion what the wind and elements have done, so we hear the sweet sound of the reed flute. The apprentice fell asleep listening. The woodcarver listened intently to the reed. Tears of joy ran down his face. "Listen, listen, the perfect carver." The boy stirred, then fell asleep and snored, adding another melody to the reed flute and the wind in the trees. So that fit perfectly for that. Thank you, Mark. All right. Joshu and the Fly Whisk. I met Joshu in a bar outside of El Paso. He had the entire bar singing an old Chinese lullaby. The cover band played Waylon and Willie was on break. The song ended and the men laughed and raised their Budweisers high. Joshu slapped his fly whisk on his left shoulder. Not knowing who he was, I elbowed in beside him as the band took the stage. "What is a monk doing in a dusty bar in Texas?" I asked. "If the Buddha tapped your elbow and ordered a beer, would your intention be here or caught in that musty fly trap?" He tapped my head with the end of his fly whisk. It was then I knew. Seeing this, he slapped the bar with his whisk and disappeared. I rubbed my eyes as I heard the harmonica player do a serviceable Mickey solo. The door to the bar opened. The old man whisked the sky as he stepped into the dusty night. There was a storm coming. I realized that I like to talk a lot about storms. I think it kind of changes that mood a little bit. Okay to read a couple more? A little reverent on this one. This one's called Road Retreat and a Hair Trigger Prostate. It was 1982. I was sitting in meditation on the side of Route 10 outside of Tallahassee when a man in a truck pulled over to pick me up. My sign read, "Anywhere, everywhere." "This is a dangerous road to sit down on," he said. I explained I was on retreat, meditating, 20 minutes on the hour. "That's perfect. I got a hair trigger prostate and have to stop and try to take a piss at least once an hour." His Ford pickup spun back onto the highway, losing traction on soft gravel before gaining it on the asphalt. "Let me get you a beer." His breath was a mixture of Slim Jims and Coors. He had driven to Tallahassee to see his mama and was now heading back to Houston for a hot lead working on an oil rig in the Gulf. He talked, lost love, barroom fights, Nam. After a bathroom break and back on the 10, I was deep in meditation. "My daddy got this from an SS officer in World War II. He pulled a Luger from behind his seat. Want to go a-shooting?" Having meditated the previous week in a cemetery in Maine and then walking the streets seeing skeletons, I recognized the whisper of death. He pulled off Route 10 onto an old logging road, turned into a clearing, grabbed a half dozen empty bottles and lined them up on a crumbling stone wall. He blasted away into the night. my meditation scented with burning hickory. We rolled into Houston and parted ways. You sure are a good listener, friend. He offered a warm Coors. I declined. Thanked him for the ride and made my way down the street to meditate on the sidewalk. A truck swerved close to the curb and a bottle whistled by my head, exploding on the concrete. Effing hippie! In the distance, cars sped the 10, and refineries exhaled yellow air. A lone crow cawed and flew northbound. Just one more from Blues of the Lost Places. I'll try see if I can get a sound on my bye. It's a little bit strange tonight coming in here. Mountains speak. Hotai met Chuanza on Song Mountain. He slowly lowered his enormous bag filled with toys and sweets for children. Chuanza stood, his long robes and beard swaying in the wind. They said nothing, and the silence filled with conversation. Chuanza, when the snow melts, which is river? Which is snow? Hotai, I breathe in oceans and breathe out clouds. Chuanza, when the kusha grass sways, where does the wind come from? Hotai, the red-crowned crane waits while the world moves. Fish caught as a lightning bolt. They sparred like this for 10 days and then laughed and drank rice wine. When they left, Hotai brought toys and sweets to children in the town below. Chuanza folded his mist robes and disappeared into stillness. I love that story in Taoism, that oftentimes masters would meet on a mountaintop and they would barb. It was poetry in action, right? So you threw out a line, and then the other person immediately had to come back with a line. And of course, you can't, I don't know if you can totally trust the stories, but they talk about like 10 days that would happen, or a couple days that they would just completely bar back and forth. But it's really cool. So I took it as a suggestion to bring that into high schools when I was working in high schools. And I actually had kids write some remarkable poetry by doing that. They were doing, it was awesome. Once they got over the idea of the strangeness of it, then probably the second class in, they were going at it. It was remarkable to see, for sure. Where are we at? I'm going to end just with 2 more poems here, if that's okay. And this Katahdin series, I'm trying to do a little bit with not only people who seem to enjoy the poems and then a thought afterwards too. So it might be a book of like meditations as well as poetry too. I pray for fallen trees. In the community of trees, my breath and heart slow. I wonder if I can lift my legs They seem to be wooden. In admiration, are roots growing from toes and bubbling well points? Am I the spiritual weather vane these brothers and sisters are? I pray for fallen trees. I am mortified when I hear a chainsaw. Once as a child, I put my hands on a giant sequoia. I fell into a dream in the complete silence of the forest. Squirrel, owl, ant, beetle, various birds, and life filled my dream. I lived and died with this tree as home. When our family left, I didn't talk for 2 days. Silence commands attention. Communication commands reciprocity. I was talking to the sacred one with my slow breath and heart. Meditation for this one is, there are many benefits that scientists have determined from forest bathing, Shinru Yoku. There is such a rich offering of phytochemicals from trees that in Japan they use forest bathing as a tool for recovery. It is a form of ecotherapy. This is wonderful, and I love this research as it shows the interconnection of all beings. I like to think of the exchange as spiritual as well. Standing meditation Qigong is predicated on the close relationship humans have with trees. In this exercise, we root and let go of tension to be like a tree. Classes I have taken out into the forest have inevitably had individuals that started seeing faces in trees. I encourage all to find time for the forest, to feel the connection, to communicate with them as they do with each other. They love you, as all in the cosmos does. Find the reverence and be like a tree, not taking, but giving.
Can you read it again? Same poem.
Same poem? Sure, absolutely. I pray for fallen trees. In the community of trees, my breath and heart slow. I wonder if I can lift my legs. They seem to be wooden in admiration. Are roots growing from toes and bubbling well points? Am I the spiritual weather vane these brothers and sisters are? I pray for fallen trees. I am mortified when I hear a chainsaw. Once as a child, I put my hands on a giant sequoia. I fell into a dream in the complete silence of the forest. Squirrel, owl, ant, beetle, various birds and life filled my dream. I lived and died with this tree as home. When our family left, I didn't talk for 2 days. Silence commands attention. Communication commands reciprocity. I was talking to the sacred one with my slow breath and heart. There are many benefits that scientists have determined from forest bathing, Shinrin Yoku. There's such a rich offering of phytochemicals from trees that in Japan they use forest bathing as a tool for recovery. It is a form of ecotherapy. This is wonderful, and I love this research as it shows the interconnection of all beings. I like to think of the exchange as spiritual as well. Standing meditation Qigong is predicated on the close relationships humans have with trees. In this exercise, we root and let go of tension to be like a tree. Classes I have taken out into the forest have inevitably had individuals that start seeing faces in the trees. I encourage all to find time for the forest, to feel the connection, to communicate with them as they do with each other. They love you as all in the cosmos does. Find the reverence and be like a tree, not taking, but giving. It's an interesting thing. I still am teaching Qigong, but I taught out in the public for 30 years, and sometimes I would take, people to do standing meditation, and sometimes just the basic holding the tree posture, out with a tree, and sometimes doing this reciprocal process where the energy is coming in and out to the tree and then reversing that process. But it's really curious because almost every class I ever taught outdoors, sure enough, one or two people would start to see a face and they'd say, wow, that was freaky. I'd say, oh, tell me what happened. I started to see a face in that tree. So, I think that it's really interesting. We know through science that our perception is very limited. What we're seeing in the world is so small for what we really could see if our eyes were wide open. I sometimes think of the Bhagavad Gita when Arjuna was shown what life and death is with Krishna. He was like overwhelmed because it's like, okay, that's enough of that. Could you please fold it back into Krishna? It's just overwhelming, right? I mean, it's overwhelming what we miss. I think about that a lot. Okay, to finish with one more. And this one's from the Katahdin Series too. Fluent in cloud, when clouds began to speak. Long ago, before human beings lived, ocean asked the rivers. We talk in waves and tides, and I enjoy my conversations with you, as you gift me with sisters and brothers born as droplets. I look up and see vast blue sky and want to talk to him, but don't know how. The rivers talked all day and towards evening came up with an answer. We all must let our sisters' air and wind fill with droplets. We will do this by letting go, sighing at the beauty of what we have been gifted, and letting that exhale bring the gift to our sisters. Ocean was satisfied. Wind and air agreed. They gathered the content sighs from the rivers and oceans and began creating. Clouds appeared from their work. They created them from the top of sacred Mount Katahdin, who at that time was much higher, one of the highest mountains in the world. Clouds at first were very noisy. They talked loudly after they formed and frightened the new life that began to appear on our sacred mother's skin. Ocean talked with air and wind again and asked them to please talk to their new creations so they would speak softly. At first, the clouds were brash and arrogant, but over time they learned to speak respectfully. Something all beings learn. Well, maybe most anyway. Today I saw a dragon cloud, and she whispered to me all the forms she had ever taken. She was strong and free. Later in the day, she cried in gratitude and offered her children to the rivers and oceans. Sacred Mount Katahdin watched and smiled, fluent in cloud. Thank you so much for having me out here tonight.
Thank you so much. Gift. We have I don't know if you know Abigail Holmes.
Oh, yes, I do.
Well, she says, loving all the poems and fun creative stories, beautiful written works.
Ah, nice.
And Mallory Rich
Yes.
says, so wonderful to see and hear you read your lovely poetry tonight, Jason. I'm loving your Katahdin series. I'm glad you were asked to reread the last one. It is my favorite one of the night.
Nice.
Encourage all to find time with the forest and to feel connection. Be like a tree, not taking but giving. Your friend, Mal.
Nice. Wonderful.
I'm
Wonderful.
glad that we could have these people here as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank
Absolutely.
you for coming and joining us on Zoom, everyone.
Yeah.